Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Tonight, we're trading the open seas for something a little darker. Imagine an island wrapped in fear, its ports sealed, whispers of a terrible sickness carried on the wind. Now imagine a figure silhouetted against the moon, a boat slipping silently through the waves, not running from the danger, but towards opportunity. Trust me, being a smuggler during the plague was nothing like the movies, mostly. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where are you listening from tonight and what time is it? Now dim the lights, turn on a fan, and let's ease into tonight's journey together under the cover of plague. You breathe in the air of the harbor, a complicated perfume of salt spray, the sharp, clean scent of the sea mixing with the earthier, heavier smells of drying fish, and the warm, sticky tar used to seal the seams of boats. Below your worn boots, the rough-hewn planks of the dock creak, a low, steady rhythm under the weight of passing feet and rumbling carts. It's a sound as familiar to you as your own heartbeat. The air is cool and damp, clinging to the rough wool of your coat, a constant reminder that you live and work on the edge of the ocean above the immediate sounds of the waterfront, the gentle lapping of waves against stone. The groan of ropes tightening on winches, the squawk of gulls circling hopefully overhead. You can sometimes catch the faint, mournful tune of a sea shanty drifting from an anchored vessel, or the muffled, quick murmur of voices from a darkened doorway just up the alley. These sounds are the breath of the port, exhaling the day's work and inhaling the night's possibilities. You run a calloused hand along the damp stone wall of a warehouse as you walk, the rough texture familiar and grounding. These stones have seen generations of cargo pass through, both the kind the crown knows about and the kind it prefers not to. Your eyes, accustomed to the low light of pre-dawn and the deep dark of moonless nights, easily pick out the shapes of stacked barrels and crates, looming like silent sentinels waiting for their journey. An oil slick spreads in a rainbow sheen across the murky water near the quay, catching the weak light filtering through the morning mist. Another common sight in a busy working port life here moves to a different drum than in the grand cities across the water. It's a rhythm dictated by tides, by weather, and by opportunity. And opportunity, in a place like this, often wears a cloak of shadow and moves in the quiet hours. You are part of that rhythm. Your hands, thick and strong, are used to the feel of coarse rope, the weight of a heavy bale, the smooth, cool glass of a bottle wrapped carefully in straw. You know the slick metallic scent of spilled spirits, the dry, leafy smell of tobacco before it's cured, the satisfying heft of a tea chest. In this town, conversations in certain taverns have a coded language, a quick turn of phrase that means more than the words themselves. A casual question about the fishing conditions might not be about fish at all. A boat that lingers offshore just a little too long, a specific light flickering in a window on a certain night. These are the subtle cues, the shared secrets that weave through the everyday hustle. Everyone knows, or at least suspects, that the prosperity of this island owes a significant debt to goods that haven't paid their proper respects to the customs men. You see the sharp, knowing glances exchanged between men who work the docks and the sea, eyes that are constantly scanning, evaluating, assessing risks and opportunities. They are watching the authorities, yes, but they are also watching each other, a silent understanding passing between them. This is the world you navigate. A world of routine runs to nearby coasts under the veil of darkness, of hidden coves and secret drops, of quick profits and quicker getaways. It's a world of calculated risks, of weighing the odds, the chance of getting caught against the certainty of making a good living, perhaps even a bit more than a good living. It feels stable, predictable in its own unpredictable way. The biggest worries are usually the weather or a particularly diligent new customs officer. But the sea has a way of bringing more than just cargo to your shores, and sometimes the unseen currents carry far more dangerous things than just rough waves. The rhythm of the port town, usually so steady and predictable, begins to subtly falter. It starts not with an official announcement, but with whispers carried on the same winds that bring the ships. A vessel arrives from a French port, perhaps, or maybe one that last called at a Spanish or Italian city, and the captain's face is grim, his answers short. Stories begin to circulate in the taverns, hushed at first, then louder with each drink. Tales of a sickness spreading far away on the continent, a return of the dreaded pestilence. You hear snippets of conversation, disjointed and frightening. Someone mentions a city where the streets are empty. Another talks of ships turned away from harbors. The details are hazy, the numbers uncertain, but the core of the message is a cold knot tightening in the gut. Something terrible is happening elsewhere, and its moving official news, when it arrives, is often days or even weeks behind the rumors. Letters from authorities across the water, carried in the captain's pouch, are opened with trepidation. They speak in formal language of increased mortality and necessary precautions, confirming the presence of a serious illness without always naming it directly. These official reports are often dry, but their implications are terrifyingly clear. They arrive alongside physical newspapers, the ink smelling faintly of the journey, but the news within is already outdated, describing a situation that has likely worsened considerably since the paper was printed. This blend of delayed official warnings and exaggerated travelers' tales creates a potent atmosphere of fear and uncertainty. You see it in the eyes of the merchants gathered on the quay, their usual boisterous talk replaced by worried speculation. They rely on the sea for their livelihoods, for bringing in the goods that fill their warehouses and line their pockets. Now the very vessels that represent their prosperity are also potential carriers of disaster. The sailors, too, those who have seen the world and usually swagger with confidence, seem more subdued. They've heard the grimmest stories firsthand, or know men who have. Their usual cheerful disregard for danger is replaced by a new, quiet anxiety. You might see them performing small, personal rituals for luck or protection, things they wouldn't have bothered with a few weeks ago. In the fish market, conversations stop abruptly as someone who just came ashore walks past, their provenance unknown. Are they healthy? Where have they been? Every new face is scrutinized, every cough or sneeze noted with a silent, internal flinch. The easy camaraderie of the port is frayed by suspicion. The world outside, usually a source of goods and news, is now a source of dread. Each sail on the horizon no longer just represents a potential delivery. It represents a gamble, a question mark hanging in the air. Is it bringing silk and spice, or sickness and sorrow? The air itself seems to grow heavy with unspoken fear, a subtle shift from the familiar comfort of sea air to something charged with a new, unseen threat. The distant sickness is no longer just a faraway problem. It feels like it's beginning its slow, deliberate creep towards your shores. But for those who operate outside the strictures of legitimate trade, those who are already accustomed to shadows and risk, a different kind of calculation is beginning. As the official world starts to shut down, new, illicit possibilities begin to flicker in the periphery. And then the predictable rhythm of the port town shatters. The whispers coalesce into official action. Orders arrive, perhaps by a fast cutter sent ahead, or perhaps carried by a nervous official from the mainland. These orders are stark and unyielding. The island is to be placed in quarantine. The word itself hangs in the air, heavy with historical dread. Suddenly, the bustling harbor transforms. No longer a place of constant, lively traffic, it becomes eerily still. Ships arriving are met not with open arms and waiting merchants, but with stern-faced officials and the chilling sight of a yellow flag being hoisted aloft. This isn't just any flag. It's the dreaded Yellow Jack, or Quebec flag, a plain yellow banner known throughout the maritime world as the stark symbol of disease and forced isolation. You watch as vessels, their sails still carrying the memory of the open sea, are directed to anchor far from the shore, riding restlessly on the waves like pariahs, their yellow flags snapping in the wind, a visible warning to anyone who might approach. The docks, so recently vibrant with activity, are now deserted. The usual symphony of creaking wood, shouting sailors, and rumbling carts is replaced by a profound, unsettling silence, broken only by the cries of the gulls who seem oblivious to the human fear that has descended. Warehouses stand shuttered and locked, their doors barred not just against thieves, but against an invisible enemy. Piles of goods intended for trade sit idle, their potential profit frozen by fear. Official notices are posted in prominent places, on the customs house door, in the market square, detailing the stringent new rules. No one is to come ashore from quarantined ships. No goods are to be unloaded. Movement within the town itself might be restricted, certain areas potentially cordoned off if sickness is suspected. Patrols, perhaps of nervous militia or hastily deputized townsfolk, might appear, their presence a constant, visible reminder of the enforced separation. The feeling that settles over the island is one of being cut off. The sea, usually the lifeblood connecting you to the wider world, is now a barrier, a moat protecting or perhaps trapping the inhabitants. The familiar horizon feels different, more distant, less inviting. Every ship that appears is now a potential threat, its approach watched with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. Fear that it might bring sickness, hope that it might somehow signal an end to this isolation. This enforced stillness is a strange experience for a community built on movement and exchange. The air tastes the same, smells the same, but the feeling of it is different, charged with anxiety, thick with the unknown. You find yourself constantly scanning the water, the shore, the faces of the people you encounter. Are they healthy? Have they been near anyone who is ill? The normal rhythms of trust and interaction are disrupted, replaced by a pervasive wariness. The island, usually a hub of clandestine activity, is now officially locked down, creating a new, unprecedented landscape for those who thrive in the shadows. But where others see only closure and danger, the smuggler's mind begins to see gaps, new vulnerabilities in the system designed to isolate them. The official world might have ground to a halt, ports sealed, legitimate trade frozen. But for you, the smuggler, the sudden, fearful silence isn't just an inconvenience. It's a signal, a profound shift in the landscape of risk and reward. The quarantine, designed to create a barrier against disease, has also created a massive, unprecedented disruption in supply. And wherever legitimate supply chains falter, the demand doesn't just vanish. It often shifts quietly into the shadows. These islands, Guernsey and the Isle of Man, weren't just minor stops on the smuggling map in the 18th century. They were powerhouses, veritable hubs of illicit trade. Their locations, their relative autonomy from strict mainland laws, and a long-standing local culture that often turned a blind eye or even actively participated, made them ideal centers for storing and distributing vast quantities of untaxed goods. We are talking about staggering amounts of brandy, gin, tea, tobacco, silks, and other high-demand items flowing through these channels, bypassing duties that could add 50%, 100%, or even more to the retail price on the mainland. There were warehouses specifically built to hold smuggled goods, complex networks of distributors, and a surprising level of organization behind the seemingly chaotic runs. Now, imagine that infrastructure suddenly meeting a complete shutdown of its legitimate competition. The merchants who would normally import tea legally from the East India Company, their ships are stuck in quarantine or they're too afraid to sail. The vintners who import wine and spirits, their supply lines are severed. But the thirst for brandy hasn't gone away. The desire for tea persists. The need for tobacco is as strong as ever. This sudden vacuum in the market means that the goods you can potentially bring in, the items you've been storing or can still access through your clandestine networks, are no longer just slightly cheaper than the legitimate stuff. They are, in many cases, the only stuff available. And when you have the only supply of a highly desired commodity, you can name your price. You watch the empty harbor, the silent docks, and a new kind of calculation begins in your mind. The risks have certainly escalated. Getting caught breaking quarantine is a far more serious offense than just avoiding customs duties. The fear of the sickness itself is a cold, undeniable presence. But the potential rewards, they are suddenly enormous. An item that you might have moved for a decent profit before the plague could now fetch 4, 5, maybe even 10 times its normal price on the mainland, where fear and scarcity are driving people to desperation. This isn't just about making a living anymore. It's about the possibility of making a fortune, of leveraging the world's fear into personal prosperity. The silent port, intended to be a tomb for trade, is suddenly looking like an unprecedented opportunity. The challenge is figuring out how to move through the fear, how to navigate the new, invisible enemy lurking in the air and on the waves. Tonight, the silence of the harbor isn't the usual peaceful quiet of a sleeping town. It's a brittle, stretched-thin silence, loaded with fear. Every small sound seems unnaturally loud. The gentle lapping of the water against the hull of your small boat sounds like heavy footsteps on gravel. The soft dip of the oars as you pull away from the deserted quay echoes in the stillness, each stroke a potential alarm bell. Even your own breathing seems too loud in your ears, ragged from a mixture of exertion and sheer, cold dread. You keep the boat close to the shadows of the anchored, quarantined ships, their dark shapes looming like silent, infected beasts in the faint moonlight. Their yellow flags, even in the gloom, are stark, terrifying symbols. You give them a wide berth, a deep, primal fear making the hairs on your arms stand on end. The cargo you are going to pick up, waiting offshore, supposedly hasn't come from one of these ships, but the fear of contamination clings to everything now. As you row, you constantly scan the shoreline, not just for the usual customs patrols, but for something far less predictable. Are there frightened residents acting as lookouts from their windows? Has the militia set up a new, unusual patrol route along the coastal path you usually rely on? Every dark recess of the land seems to hold a watching pair of eyes. You pull harder on the oars, the physical effort a small, temporary distraction from the gnawing anxiety. Your muscles burn, but the jittery energy of fear makes it hard to find a steady rhythm. Finally, you reach the prearranged spot, a small cove a few miles down the coast that should be more secluded. But even here, the silence feels heavy. You wait, straining your ears. Was that a cough from the shore? Or just the wind in the gorse? Every natural sound is now suspect. Your contact should be here, ready with the goods brought from another vessel, one supposedly from a clean port, though who can truly be sure now? When a figure finally emerges from the darkness near the water's edge, you feel a jolt. Is it them, or is it a trap? Trust, usually a complex but understood part of your world, has become another casualty of the sickness. You signal softly, a prearranged whistle pattern barely louder than the waves. A matching whistle replies. Relief washes over you, quickly followed by a fresh wave of tension as they begin to move the cargo. Working quickly in the near-total darkness, you handle the bales and crates. The rough hessian of the bales scrapes your skin. The wood of the crates feels solid, real, but a part of your mind screams questions. What if? What if the sickness is clinging to the fabric, hidden in the straw packing? You force the thoughts down, focusing on the task. You try to hold your breath near the cargo, a useless, superstitious gesture, you know, but you do it anyway. There's no time for the usual careful inspection, just a frantic, silent transfer of weight and potential wealth. The air here, away from the immediate harbor smells, carries the scent of damp earth and sea salt, but also faintly the aroma of the goods themselves, the sweetish, cloying smell of spirits, the dry, leafy scent of tobacco. Tonight, these familiar smells are tainted by fear, the very essence of your livelihood now carrying the potential reek of death. Your hands, usually so sure, tremble slightly as you secure the last bale. The exchange of money is quick, almost brutally so. No counting, just a bundle of coins pressed into your hand in the dark. A few whispered words, a quick nod, and your contact melts back into the shadows. You are alone again, with the silent boat, the dark cargo, and the long, tense row back. Every splash of the oars, every creak of the boat, feels amplified in the profound silence of the quarantined coast. The fear isn't just for getting caught anymore. It's a deeper, colder dread that has hitched a ride on the very cargo you risked everything to obtain. Your journey through the shadows was far from over, and the most terrifying part might not be the guards, but the unseen passenger you carried. Life on the island under quarantine settles into a strange, disquieting rhythm. The initial shock gives way to a pervasive, low-grade anxiety that hums beneath every interaction. The streets that were recently bustling with the energy of a working port are now unnaturally quiet, the silence amplifying every distant sound, a dog barking, a shutter closing, the cry of a seagull overhead. You find yourself walking differently, perhaps keeping more distance from others, your eyes flicking nervously towards anyone who coughs or seems unwell. The familiar faces of neighbors now carry a new uncertainty. You know them, you've shared drinks with them, traded gossip at the market, but you can't possibly know where they've been, who they've encountered. The isolation isn't just from the outside world. It begins to creep into the heart of the community itself. Gatherings cease. The tavern, usually a lively hub of news and camaraderie, becomes a place of hushed conversations and nervous glances, if it remains open at all. Even visiting friends or family carries a new, unspoken risk. You might stand on the doorstep, talking from a distance, the fear of proximity outweighing the desire for comfort. This forced separation gnaws at the spirit, replacing easy trust with a constant, low-level suspicion. Beyond the psychological toll, the practical realities of the lockdown bite hard. The ships that brought manufactured goods, certain foodstuffs not grown locally, textiles, tools, even simple things like salt or coal, they are gone or anchored out of reach. The carefully constructed network of legitimate supply that kept the island provisioned is severed. Local farms can provide some food, of course, but not everything. Prices for available goods begin to climb steeply, making even necessities a luxury for many. You see the desperation in people's eyes, the worried frowns as they count their dwindling coin. How long can this last? And this is where your world, the world of shadows and unofficial channels, collides with the stark, undeniable needs of the community. The official rules say no contact, no goods. But reality says people need to eat, they need supplies. Suddenly, the smuggler isn't just someone bringing untaxed brandy for the tavern owner or fancy silk for a wealthy merchant's wife. You become, whether you intended to or not, a potential lifeline. Whispers begin to circulate again, different from the fearful rumors of sickness. These are whispers of boats that somehow evade the patrols, of goods appearing seemingly out of nowhere. You hear hushed talk in back alleys, coded requests passed through trusted intermediaries. "Are you running?" someone might ask, their eyes darting around nervously. "Can you get flour?" Medicine, the community's view of you and your kind, becomes complex, tangled in a knot of fear and necessity. Are you risking their lives by potentially bringing the sickness ashore with your cargo? Absolutely. The fear is real, visceral. But are you also the only one willing or able to bring in the things they desperately need or simply crave to make this grim existence slightly more bearable? Often, yes. You are a pariah and a provider rolled into one. People recoil from the idea of you, the potential danger you represent, even as they secretly seek you out, their need or desire overcoming their fear. It creates a strange, transactional morality. Is it wrong to buy potentially contaminated goods if your child is hungry, or if a bit of smuggled tea is the only comfort you have left? The lines between right and wrong blur in the face of fear and scarcity. The silent ports and empty warehouses have not only created a financial opportunity for you, they've placed you at the center of a desperate, ethical tightrope walk for the entire island. And in the stillness, something new began to stir within that fear-stricken community, a complex, reluctant dependence. Navigating the coast under quarantine feels less like sailing and more like slipping through a minefield of fear and regulations. Each trip is a heightened performance, a ballet of stealth against a backdrop of profound stillness. You time your runs with meticulous precision, factoring in not just the tides and moon phase as before, but also the rumored patrol schedules, the shifts of the nervous militia, even the hours when the fear-stricken town is most likely to be asleep. The coastline you know so intimately now seems to hold hidden dangers in every inlet and shadow your boat, usually a familiar, almost friendly extension of yourself, feels different now. Every creak of the hull, every splash of the oar seems amplified in the unnatural silence. You might muffle the oarlocks with rags, a small concession to stealth, though you wonder if anyone is truly listening in the dead of night, or if they are all just locked inside their homes, praying. The cold spray on your face isn't just the sea. It feels like it could be carrying something else, something unseen. Meeting contacts offshore or in secluded coves becomes a ritual of paranoia. The exchange of goods and coin is hurried, conducted with minimal words and averted eyes. You might use long hooks to transfer bales, avoiding direct touch, a silent acknowledgement of the invisible enemy that might be clinging to the very source of your profit. You try not to breathe deeply near the cargo, a futile, anxious tick. The smell of tobacco or spirits, usually comforting in its familiarity, now carries a faint, imagined whiff of contagion. The risks are astronomical. Getting caught now isn't just a fine or imprisonment. It could mean forced quarantine yourself, or worse, being blamed for bringing the sickness ashore, facing the wrath of a terrified community. You've heard stories, maybe exaggerated, maybe not, of swift, brutal justice meted out on suspicion. But the demand is a powerful tide pulling you out. It's not just for luxury items anymore, though those still fetch astronomical prices. It's for essentials, medicine that's run out, flour when the local supply is gone, even just candles or soap. You are bringing in goods that make a tangible difference in people's ability to cope, to survive. You might see a familiar face in the shadows, a neighbor or acquaintance, their usual demeanor replaced by a desperate, pleading look as they receive a small, smuggled package. In that moment, the line between criminal and provider blurs completely. You are risking your life, and potentially theirs for profit, yes, but you are also filling a void left by the collapse of the legitimate world. This double life, the tension between the immense financial gain and the constant, gnawing fear, starts to wear you down. Sleep is fitful, filled with anxious dreams of patrols or coughing fits. You find yourself checking your own body constantly, feeling for fever, listening to your own breath. Every minor ailment is a potential death sentence. The isolation of your work is amplified by the island's isolation. You can't truly confide in anyone about the tightrope you're walking. You are making money, perhaps more than you ever have. The coins you stash away represent not just wealth, but a perverse sort of leverage gained from the world's misery. But the cost is measured in something other than coin. It's measured in sleepless nights, in constant vigilance, and in the cold, heavy weight of knowing that with every successful run, you might be bringing the very thing the island fears most closer to its shores. This clandestine trade isn't just about moving goods under the cover of darkness anymore. It's about navigating a landscape of fear, where the most dangerous enemy is unseen, and the greatest profit comes with the most terrifying risk. And the silence of the quarantined island, once just quiet, now feels heavy with unspoken deals and terrifying possibilities. Weeks bleed into months. The quarantine, initially an emergency measure, begins to feel like a permanent state of being. The initial sharp fear hasn't gone away, but it's dulled slightly, replaced by a persistent, draining anxiety and a deep weariness. Life must go on in some fashion, but it does so under a constant, oppressive cloud of dread. The invisible enemy, the sickness, dictates everything. With no clear understanding of how the disease spreads, the concept of germs is centuries away. People grasp at any belief, any practice that promises protection. The prevailing theory is often that of miasma, the idea that bad air, rising from filth or decaying matter, carries the sickness. So, people engage in practices they hope will purify the air or ward off the noxious fumes. You might see bonfires lit at crossroads, their smoke supposedly cleansing the air, though they only add a layer of acrid smell to the already heavy atmosphere. People carry oranges, lemons, or pouches filled with strong-smelling herbs like rue, lavender, or rosemary, holding them to their noses when they venture outside, believing the pleasant or pungent aromas will somehow Arabic dal Arabic fa Arabic tain away the illness. The air, instead of just smelling of the sea and the town, is now often thick with the scent of wood smoke and competing floral or herbal perfumes, a strange, fragrant shield against an unseen, killer. Other practices are more rooted in superstition or older folk beliefs. Some wear amulets, symbols or charms intended to ward off evil spirits or bad luck, which the sickness is often seen as a form of. You might notice people avoiding certain streets or houses where sickness is rumored to have struck, giving them a wide berth, sometimes even throwing quick signs of the cross as they pass. Dietary rules might suddenly become important, certain foods avoided, others consumed in the belief they purify the humors of the body and make it less susceptible. The island, usually a place of robust practicality, becomes a place where ancient fears and desperate rituals walk hand in hand with the very real threat of death. Into this atmosphere of fear and strange practice, you continue to move. These beliefs and rituals impact your work directly. You might have to alter a planned route because a certain area is being avoided, or find a new meeting point because your contact is afraid to go near the old one. You might see the fear in the eyes of the people you deal with, their eagerness for the goods you carry mixed with their visible anxiety about the close proximity required for the exchange. They might insist you leave the goods in a certain spot for a period before they touch them, or purify them with smoke or vinegar practices you indulge, because their fear is a palpable thing, and their money is real. You yourself aren't immune to the pervasive fear and the strange practices it engenders. Even if you don't fully believe in the miasma theory or the power of every amulet, the sheer weight of community anxiety is infectious. You might find yourself instinctively holding your breath when passing a seemingly empty house, or carrying a sprig of rosemary yourself, just in case. The constant exposure to the idea of the sickness, the visual and olfactory reminders of people's desperate attempts to ward it off, begins to seep into your own consciousness. The world has shrunk, become more fearful, and yet your clandestine work continues, navigating not just the physical patrols, but the psychological landscape of a community gripped by an ancient terror. You are a creature of the shadows, but now the shadows themselves seem to be filled with unseen threats, and the very air you breathe feels heavy with both the fear of sickness and the strange, sometimes bizarre, rituals people use to try and keep it at bay. And the silent island, once just quiet, now hums with a low-grade anxiety and the rustling of dried herbs carried in fearful hands. The initial surge of adrenaline that fueled those first daring runs begins to wear thin, replaced by a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. The constant vigilance, the perpetual tension, the lack of true rest, it grinds you down. Each successful trip brings a wave of temporary relief, quickly followed by the return of the low-grade dread as you prepare for the next one. It's a cycle of fear and brief reprieve, repeated over and over under the heavy cloak of the quarantine. The risks haven't lessened. In fact, they feel more pervasive. Being caught in normal times meant facing customs men, maybe losing your cargo, a stint in jail, a fine. Bad, certainly, but survivable. Now, breaking quarantine carries a far graver penalty. Authorities, desperate to contain the sickness, view anyone violating the lockdown as a direct threat to the entire community. The law becomes draconian, reflecting the terror of the times. You hear whispers, confirmed by hushed reports, of harsh punishments, not just imprisonment, but forced isolation in grim, unsanitary lazarettos, quarantine stations, where the chances of survival are slim even if you weren't already sick, or even summary justice, blamed for bringing death to the island. The potential cost is no longer just your freedom or your livelihood. It's your life itself, and the deep-seated terror of a terrified populace is a force far more dangerous than any customs cutter. Yet you continue. Because the rewards remain astronomical, distorted by the desperate scarcity. A simple shipment of coffee or sugar, mundane in normal times, is now worth a small fortune. The desperation for goods on the mainland, cut off from their usual sources, means buyers are willing to pay almost anything. The scale of potential profit dwarfs the risks you used to take, creating a warped logic where the unimaginable danger seems almost necessary. You are operating in a market fundamentally reshaped by disease, where fear is the dominant currency and access to goods is power. Zooming out for a moment, this wasn't unique to your island. Across Europe during major plague outbreaks, from the Mediterranean ports to the Baltic, official trade routes seized up, crippling economies. But the demand for goods didn't magically disappear, it simply went underground. Crises like these, while devastating, often inadvertently spurred the growth and sophistication of illicit trade networks. Smugglers, already adept at operating outside the law, adapted their methods, found new routes, and exploited the vacuum left by legitimate merchants. Governments, overwhelmed by the public health crisis, struggled to simultaneously enforce quarantines and police their borders against illicit goods. The plague, in a strange, dark twist, became a catalyst for the shadow economy, forcing authorities to confront the fact that their control was far more tenuous than they believed, and highlighting how essential, or simply desired, goods would always find a way to move, even in the face of death. For you, personally, this prolonged period of operating under extreme stress changes you. The constant fear either sharpens your senses to an almost unbearable degree or begins to numb you, making you reckless. You learn to read the subtle signs of fear in others, to anticipate the reactions of panicked authorities. The lines you once drew between necessity and greed, between acceptable risk and suicidal folly, blur into insignificance. You are a creature perfectly adapted to a world turned upside down, a necessary evil in a time of crisis. You are surviving, even thriving in a way, amidst widespread suffering, a fact that sits heavily in the quiet moments, if there are any. The silent island has become your hunting ground, and its fear your unlikely ally. And so you row back one last time towards the silent, quarantined island, the cargo secured, the transaction complete. The fear hasn't vanished, but it's mingled now with an almost weary sense of accomplishment, a grim satisfaction born of navigating the impossible. You've moved through the fear, through the silence, through the strange, unsettling rituals of a community under siege. You've seen how quickly the familiar world can crumble, how thin the veneer of order can be when faced with an unseen enemy living through that time. That long, stretched-out period of isolation and fear, you learned things about desperation, about ingenuity, and about the strange, often morally ambiguous ways humans find to survive and even profit when the usual rules are suspended. You saw the best and worst of people, the fear that made them shun their neighbors, yes, but also the quiet resilience, the determination to keep going, to find what they needed, by whatever means necessary. You were a part of that system, a shadow moving in the vacuum left by legitimate trade, fulfilling needs that no one else could or would. Zooming out one final time, we see that moments of profound crisis throughout history, whether from disease, war, or natural disaster, have always tested the boundaries of societies and economies. They expose vulnerabilities in our systems, yes, but they also highlight that fundamental human drive to connect, to trade, to acquire what is needed or desired, even in the face of immense obstacles and risks. The impulse to adapt, to find a way around the walls that go up, is a powerful one. It's a part of what makes us resilient, for better or for worse so, as you pull your boat onto the deserted shore, the faint scent of wood smoke and herbs still in the air, the silence of the night broken only by the distant, mournful cry of a seagull. You leave behind the heightened reality of the quarantined coast. The specific fears and rituals of that time may fade like mist with the morning sun, but the underlying truths about fear, about need, about the enduring, complex ways humans find to survive and connect, those feel as real now as they did in the hushed darkness of that long, long quarantine. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the past tonight. I hope it was a moment of calm reflection, perhaps even a little escape. If you enjoyed easing into this story with me, please consider giving the video a like and subscribing if you haven't already. It genuinely helps me continue creating these journeys for you. And now let the sounds of the night, wherever you are in the world, gentle you into a peaceful rest. Dim the lights a little more, take a slow, deep breath, and drift off, knowing that even in the darkest times of history, there were always stories, and there was always, eventually, the dawn. Good night.